My name is Bertie Uli, and I am 31 years old. On the morning of my wedding, while my white dress hung on the closet door and my 3-tier cake cooled in the venue kitchen, the phone on my vanity lit up with a name I had not seen in 9 years. Dad. One word. One heartbeat. 1 hour before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. 9 years ago, my sister told our parents I was selling drugs. They believed her. Within a week, my duffel bag was sitting on the front porch with my winter coat folded neatly on top, like somebody had thought about the weather, but not about me. For 9 years, there had been silence. And now, on the most important morning of my life, that silence had a message attached to it. What that message said and what I typed back 60 minutes before the fiddle started playing is something my family will still be trying to explain long after the cake is gone. So, before we begin, if you have ever been the quiet one who got convicted without a trial, stay with me. This story is going to answer a question you have probably been carrying for a long time. Second rise, smells like brown butter at 4 in the morning, and that smell belongs to me. I built it. Every burn scar on my forearms is a receipt. The bakery sits on Main Street in Harewick, between a hardware store and a salon that closes at 6. We live in the apartment over the shop. Most mornings, Noah is still asleep upstairs when I fire the first ovens. He is a carpenter. He proposed with a ring hidden in my box of Instant East. He said that is where I keep everything that matters. He was not wrong. For 9 years, everything that mattered to me fit in places I could lock. A lease with only my name on it. A bank account nobody else could touch. A man who knocks before opening a door in his own house. He learned early that I need the knock. People call that independence. I call it what is left over after your family holds a trial without you and you lose. Here is the thing about Doe. Doe forgives you if you are patient. Families are trickier. I was not always this careful. Once, I was a 22-year-old girl with $4,000 in cash, a second-hand phone full of cake orders, and a plan taped inside my closet door. 9 years ago, I learned what my savings looked like through my father's eyes. It did not look like flour and butter and a girl who worked doubles. It looked like a crime. Nobody called the police, mind you. Police would have meant evidence, and evidence was never the point. They just packed my bag and set it on the porch. The whole thing took less time than a batch of biscuits. How does a family do that to its quietest member overnight? To answer that, I have to take you back to the kitchen I grew up in. And I need you to look at it slowly because everything that happened later was already sitting in that room years before anyone said a word. My mother died of an aneurysm when I was 13 on a Tuesday folding laundry. My father, Mark, was a foreman at the lumber mill. A big, quiet man who loved us by fixing things. Grief broke something in him that no wrench could reach. 2 years later, he married Sharon, a receptionist at a dental office, with a 9-year-old daughter named Leah. Dad adopted Leah the following spring. In our house, our parents meant Dad and Sharon. I said it that way too. I was 15 and I wanted a family more than I wanted credit. Sharon ran the home like a waiting room. Everything scheduled, everything pleasant, nothing examined. And Leah was small and pretty and afraid of everything. She figured out young that fear was currency. The house had one law, never posted, always enforced. Whoever is crying loudest gets heard first. Leah cried beautifully. I do not say that with venom. I say it the way a baker reads a recipe. She was 9 when her mother moved her into a dead woman's house. She learned the oven she was given. Me. I learned a different trade. I learned quiet. Good grades. A part-time job at 14. Dishes done before anyone asked. I thought if I could just be easy enough, cheap enough to love, I would get to stay. Dad would look at me across the dinner table sometimes with something soft in his face. I banked it like a tip. I did not understand the arithmetic of a scared man's heart back then. When keeping the peace is the whole religion, the child who needs nothing is the child you can afford to lose. It took me years to learn that math. Leah learned it in 1 school semester, and she was about to show her work. When I was 21, I won a scholarship to a pastry certificate program 2 counties over. Not a fortune, but the first thing with my name on it that anyone might toast. Sharon planned a dinner because dinners were how she kept score with the neighbors. The night before that dinner, Leia, who was 15 by then, cut her forearm with a craft blade. Not deep. Deep enough. I found Sharon in the bathroom holding gauze. Dad stood in the hallway holding the door frame like the house was tilting. The dinner was cancelled. Which was right, the scholarship was never mentioned again. Which taught me something no program could. Late that night, my father stopped me in the hallway. I thought he was going to say something about the scholarship. Instead, he looked at a spot just left of my eyes and said, "I have to protect this family." He said it to me, not to the blade. Not to whatever storm was living in that girl's chest. To me. As if I were the weather. I said, "Okay, Dad," because I was 21 and I still thought love was a test you could pass by being agreeable. I took the certificate program at night anyway and told no one. Leah healed up fine and got her learner's permit that spring, and I started keeping my envelope of savings in my dresser drawer under the sweaters. That turned out to be the most expensive mistake of my life. By 22, I was working 2 jobs. Mornings waitressing at a pancake house. Nights stocking shelves at the grocery. Every week, I pulled a little cash from my paycheck and fed the envelope. 5s and 20s and the occasional 50. All of it aimed at one thing. A deposit on a commercial kitchen corner. First and last month, plus a used display case a church was selling. $4,000, give or take, saved over 2 years. I also kept a second phone. A scratched-up flip model from a coworker. My catering orders had outgrown my regular number. Birthday cakes, church potlucks, a wedding sheet cake that fed 200. I liked keeping that line separate. It felt professional. It felt like a beginning. If a 22-year-old you loved told you that you would hug her, you would slip her $40 toward the display case. Remember that, because nobody in my house ever asked. One evening in September, I was counting the envelope on my bed, rubber banding the bills. Then I felt the air change. Leah stood in my doorway. 16 years old. Phone loose in her hand. She was looking at the money the way some people look at a buffet. "Whoa," she said. "Where did that come from?" I told her the truth because the truth was boring. Tits. Night shifts. 2 years. She smiled and said that was so cool and drifted off down the hall. I went back to counting. I want to be fair to the girl in that doorway. I do not think she planned it all that night. I think she filed it away the way she filed everything, as material. Money looks different depending on who is telling the story about it. In my hands, it was a bakery. In her telling, 3 weeks later, it became something you would whisper about at a school lunch table. It came apart in 1 week of October in 3 moves. I have had 9 years to study the choreography. Move 1. Sharon found her own prescription sedatives in my dresser drawer tucked under the sweaters beside my envelope. She had been missing the bottle for days. Move 2. Leah summoned to the living room, dissolved. Between sobs, she confessed. I had been selling around town. The flip phone was for buyers. I had made her swear not to tell, and she was scared of me. She never once said the word drugs plainly. She did not have to. 16. Shaking. Mascara down her chin. That was the whole case. Move 3 was the money. Dad set my envelope on the coffee table like a verdict. He asked very quietly where it really came from. I did everything a person is supposed to do. I brought bank slips and pay stubs showing 2 years of withdrawals matching 2 years of shifts. I begged to drive to the clinic that night and test for every substance they could name. Sharon crossed her arms and delivered the line. I still hear in my sleep. Tests can be cheated. See how that door has no handle on the inside. Proof read as scheming. Calm read as cold. Tears would have read as guilt. There is no performance an accused person can give that satisfies an audience that needs the accusation to be true. I know that now. That Saturday, before anything could be checked by anyone, Leah took the wrong pills. She was rushed to the emergency room. She was fine by Sunday. But you cannot cross-examine a girl with a hospital bracelet. Everyone in that waiting room understood the new arrangement. My questions died on the vinyl chairs of Millbrook General. The following Friday, I came home from my shift and found the porch light on. My duffel bag sat on the welcome mat, zipped with my winter coat folded on top. Honestly, the folded coat was what broke me, the housekeeping of it, the neatness. Somebody had thought about weather. Dad opened the door before I could touch the handle. He stood in the gap the way you stand when the dog is not allowed in anymore. Sharon was a shape in the hallway light behind him. Leah was nowhere. Which was its own kind of signature. He said they had preyed on it. He said with Leah so fragile they could not have this under their roof. He never said drugs either. The word did all its work in the pauses. I asked him to look at me. He almost managed it, his eyes landing somewhere around my chin. Then he said it. The sentence he had been rehearsing his whole life. The sentence, this whole story, hangs on. I have to protect this family. I said from me. And my father said nothing at all. This was the man who taught me to ride a bike. The man who cried at my mother's funeral until his shoulders shook. The man I once watched carry a fawn off the highway. Nothing. The silence lasted maybe 4 seconds. Bread takes longer to brown. I picked up the bag and left the coat. Some pride is just grief in work boots. I drove my Corolla to the grocery store lot where at least the security guy knew my name. I slept in the back seat 3 nights. Showered at a truck stop. Clocked into both jobs on time. The one had my mother's. One had my mother's. One was my sister Brooke. I was 22 years old. My family will tell you nobody kicked me out. They will say I left. The duffel bag was already packed when I got there. But sure, I left. On the 4th morning, I drove 40 minutes west to Harwick. A town where nobody knew my name felt like clean pans. There was a diner on Main called Rosa's. Steamed up windows. Handwritten specials. I ordered the cheapest thing and took my sponge bath in the restroom. Hair in the sink. When I came out, a woman about 60 with a pencil behind her ear was leaning on the counter. She watched me, the way you watch a pot deciding whether to boil over. Rosa Delgado. She poured me a coffee I had not ordered, and asked one question. Running from trouble or toward work? I said work. I said it may be too fast. She looked at my hands, the burn scars already starting back then, the short nails. Then she hired me to wash dishes on the spot. There was a storage room behind the kitchen with a cot in it left over from a cook who had moved on. She rented it to me for almost nothing. She never once asked what happened. Not in 9 years, which is its own kind of gospel. That first night lying on the cot with the smell of onions and bleach, I made myself a promise. I want you to have the exact words because everything I did afterward grew out of them. I decided I would never again live anywhere I could be voted out of. Not a house, not a marriage, not a job, not a story. If I built it, if my name was on it, nobody could hold a family meeting about my life without me in the room. If you have ever been the one they did not believe, the one who offered proof and got silence, stay with me. Because what happened next took 9 years to arrive and 30 seconds to detonate. Here is what 9 years of building looks like. Sped up like dough in a proofing box. 2 years washing dishes and prepping pies. Then Rosa tasted my lemon bars and cleared the corner by her register. We shook hands on a revenue split. She would not take rent. Within a year there was a line out her door on Saturday mornings. The line was for me. I paid off the Corolla. I got an apartment with a deadbolt I installed myself. I took a food safety course and framed the certificate like it was a diploma from Paris. Meanwhile, 40 minutes east, another birdie was living a whole different life. In Millbrook, the story had settled into the drinking water. My old Sunday school teacher heard I was in a bad way. A girl I had waited tables with sent one text. Is it true? And my answer, whatever it was, apparently did not survive the retelling. The spring. I turned 25. I ran into a neighbor from our old street at a farmer's market between the two towns. She was there with her little boy. When she recognized me, she smiled. The smile you give a stray dog you are not sure about. Then she moved her son to her other side. One hand on his shoulder. Casual as changing lanes. Nobody had refreshed the lie in 3 years. That is the day I understood something about slander that they do not put on inspirational posters. It does not need its author. Leah could have taken it all back at any point, and by then it would not have mattered much. A lie about you, given enough quiet, stops being a story people tell and becomes a thing people know. I drove back to Harwick and rolled out 4 dozen cinnamon twists. I let the east side of the county keep its version of me. But one person from Millbrook never bought it, and she showed up once a month, like a subscription. Nana. Ruth was my father's mother's. 80 years of opinions in a floral blouse. She drove to Rosa's diner on the first Tuesday of every month for 6 years. Until the month she could not. She always took the corner booth. She always ordered black coffee and whatever I had burned the edges of. She said the burnt ones were free of vanity. She was the only person from the old life who never asked me if I did it. Not once. Not even in the beginning when asking would have been reasonable. The first Tuesday 3 months after the porch, she slid an envelope across the table, $40 inside. She said for the display case, "Do not tell your father, he is not speaking to me correctly these days either." I tried to explain about the money, the flip phone, the pills. I had my speech by then, footnotes and all. She waved it off like smoke. "Bird," she said. "She's the only one who ever called me Bird. I know money when I see it. And I know my son when he is scared." Then she buttered her toast like the matter was settled. Because for her, it was. She never fought them on it publicly. She was in her 80s, her wars were down to postcards and pie. But every month she showed up. Being believed for 1 hour a month, it turns out, is enough calories to live on. I would like to tell you she lived to see the whole harvest. She did not. But before we get there, a man came into my life through a broken oven door. My oven at the diner corner died on a Friday with 200 dinner rolls on the schedule. The repair place sent a carpenter, everything else, named Noah Bennett. In a town like Harwick, everybody's van does 3 jobs. He was 31 then, sawdust on his forearms. Quiet in a way that was not hiding anything. He fixed the hinge and the heating element in 90 minutes, and undercharged me. Then he came back Tuesday to check the calibration. Ovens do not need their calibration checked. He came back twice more and bought a coffee each time. Finally, he asked me to dinner with his ears going red. Rosa said yes from across the room before I could open my mouth. On our 4th date at a taco place with plastic chairs, he asked the normal question, "So your family?" And I made a decision I had not planned. I told him all of it. The envelope, the flip phone, Sharon's pill bottle under my sweaters, the porch light, the folded coat. It took a while. Our food went cold. He did not say wow. He did not get that lawyer look people get where they are privately weighing your story for holes. He just listened the way he measures, twice, carefully. Then he said, "So you saved $4,000 in 2 years on tips, and they never asked to see the bank slips again after that night." Like the outrage was a measurement. Like he was checking a joint that did not sit square. He believed me before I finished the sentence. I did not know that was allowed. I went home that night and cried for 20 minutes. Not about my family for once. About how low I had set the bar for being loved. Just believe me. That is it. That was the whole bar. Nana Ruth died in January at 84 in her sleep with the TV guide open on her lap. Beth called me herself so I would not hear it from a group text. The funeral was at the Methodist Church in Millbrook, and I went because grief outranks exile. Sharon met me in the vestibule with a hug for the onlookers and steel underneath. She told me it would be best for everyone if I sat in the back and kept things simple. No scene, her word. As if I were the one who made scenes. I had asked to say a few words about the woman who had bought my display case. That was declined. The program was already printed, so I sat in the last row of my own grandmother's funeral, behind cousins I used to babysit. I watched my father's shoulders from 30 feet. The same shoulders that shook at my mother's service. He never once turned around. Leah read a poem. She was 22 then and cried at the podium, and half the church cried with her. I thought she is not even faking. That is the terrible part. Everyone in that building was sincere. Afterward in the parking lot, Beth put a shoebox in my hands. Quick. Like a handoff. Inside was Nana Ruth's recipe box. Hundreds of index cards in her backhand slant. Gravy stains, the works. And an envelope with Bird on it. The note inside was brief, and I am going to give it to you exactly because it is load-bearing. Truth does not need a crowd. It just needs time. I sat in my car until the lot emptied. I was holding a cardboard box that was somehow the whole estate as far as I was concerned. Then I drove west, back toward the flower and the deadbolt. I started planning something with her cards in it. Second Rise opened 18 months later in the storefront next to Rosa's. It took a microloan from the county small business program and my display case. The name makes bakers smile. The second rise is the one that comes after the dough gets knocked down. Rosa cut the ribbon with kitchen shears. We put a door between the two shops so her coffee and my cinnamon rolls could see each other. Opening day sold out by 11. I cried in the walk-in for 4 minutes and came back out smiling. Ask any shop owner. That is just called Tuesday. That summer, Noah proposed in the kitchen at closing. Flowers still hanging in the light. He had hidden the ring in my box of instant yeast. When I found it, he went down on one knee on a floor he had tiled himself. He said he had already asked Rosa's blessing since she outranks everybody. I said yes before his knee hit the tile. More or less. We laughed. We called Beth. We ate day-old croissants on the counter like it was champagne. It was the happiest night of my life, and I want to be honest with you about what was also true. Happiness like that has edges. There is a shape a father leaves, not the man himself. The man himself, I could go months without thinking about by then. The shape, the chair he would sit in, the toast he would give. That night, after Noah fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad. I wrote guest list at the top. Then I wrote the first line and then I stopped and the pen just hovered there. I did not write anything else for a long time. The wedding was over a year out. That pad stayed on the counter for weeks. It grew into a bigger question than I was ready for. By spring, the planning had taken over the bakery's back counter. The centerpiece was the seating chart. Butcher paper, pencil, 80 names in my neatest frosting order handwriting. A farm venue outside Harewick. White barn, string lights, an October date. Noah's family took up 4 tables all by themselves. Brothers and aunts and a grandmother who mails him socks. My side had Rosa, Beth. My kitchen crew. Diner regulars who had watched me go from dish pit to storefront. It filled out fine. Except for 2 places. At the top of the paper in the venue's printed template there was a line. Father of the bride. And on the ceremony map, front row, 2 chairs. I kept skipping them the way your tongue skips a sore tooth. I penciled nothing. I erased nothing. I just kept moving cousins around them like water around a stone. Noah watched me do this for about 3 weeks. One night, he set 2 mugs down, tapped the blank line once, and asked gently, "Who is walking you in?" And I heard myself say I do not know yet, which was a lie, and we both let it stand because he is kind. I did know. I had known for years, if I am honest. Known it in the particular way you know something you cannot afford to say yet. Saying it out loud makes the other thing final. Walking down an aisle is the one moment left in modern life when a woman publicly declares who her family is. There is no hedging in it. Whoever has your arm has your answer. So the line stayed blank and the 2 front row chairs stayed unnamed on the map. Every night at closing that butcher paper asked me the same quiet question the county had been asking for 9 years. Who claims you, Birdie? And then the invitations went out, and one of them lit a fuse. No invitations crossed into Millbrook. That was policy, decided calmly over takeout. We would not send paper into that house just to watch it get discussed. But Beth got one. Beth had spent 9 years being the only person who moved between my 2 worlds with her hands visible. She drove out in June, sat at my counter with an eclair, RSVP'd, yes, before the coffee cooled. Then she went quiet in a loaded way, turning her fork over. Finally, she said a sentence that cost me a month of sleep. What if they change before October? I laughed it off in the moment. I said something salty about the odds, and she let it go, and we talked flowers. But that night, I lay awake next to Noah doing the thing I had trained myself out of. The thing I am most embarrassed to tell you. I hoped. I ran the movie. My father calls in August, says there is a shaky voicemail. There is coffee somewhere neutral. There is an apology with no but in the middle of it. He is in a gray suit in the front row in October crying into a handkerchief. I ran it twice. Then made myself get up and drank water in the dark kitchen until it stopped. Hope for people like me is not a gift. It is a tax. 9 years of records said they did not change. They redecorated. Every so often, the house needed something from me. A guilt recital at Christmas. A family is family text from an aunt. But nobody had ever said the one sentence that would cost them anything. I told myself Beth's question was just her sweetness talking. I went back to bed. And I watched the timestamp on the record. When the phone finally rang at the end of July, it was not my father. And it was not an apology. It was Beth on a Sunday night, and her voice had a crack in it before she got through. Hello. It had happened. She said it had finally happened. Back in June, Leah had picked up a DUI outside a bar in Millbrook. She was 25 now. Doing nails. Drowning in card debt. 2 weeks later, Sharon caught her taking cash out of her purse. The house convened one of its famous family meetings. The kind I used to be the subject of. Beth was there. She had driven her mom over. And in the middle of it, cornered about the money, Leah just went to pieces. Not the rehearsed pieces, the real ones. And out it came at the dining table in front of Dad and Sharon and Beth and God. The sedatives she had planted in my drawer. The story she had invented in one afternoon and fed them line by line. The flip phone that was only ever birthday cakes. She had been 16 and terrified of the money, she said. Terrified I would leave. Terrified the house would tilt again. And the lie worked so well, so fast, that there was never a safe moment to take it back. 9 years of my life confessed in under an hour. I stood in my dark bakery holding the phone with both hands. I waited for the part where somebody drags to Harwick. Beth went so quiet I could hear her breathing. Bertie, she said. That was a month ago. They told no one. They said they were handling it as a family. A month. 30 days of my father knowing his daughter was innocent. Eating breakfast, going to work. Saying grace over dinner. The verdict I had waited 9 years for had finally come in. And they had sealed it. To protect the girl who forged the evidence. Beth broke the seal because she could not sleep anymore. I thanked her. I locked up the bakery. I do not remember climbing the stairs to our apartment. Here is what they do not tell you about vindication. It arrives with no confetti. I had imagined that phone call for 9 years. In the shower. Kneading dough. At red lights. In the fantasy, the truth lands like a verdict being read, and everyone who wronged me files past to say the words. In the real version, I was a 31-year-old woman standing in her own kitchen at midnight. I was technically innocent for a month already, and nothing anywhere had moved. No call from my father. No letter from Sharon. The lie had been retired quietly. Like a defective product, with no recall notice sent to all the people still using it. My old neighbor still had her hand on her son's shoulder somewhere. I was still in a bad way in the Millbrook drinking water. That week, I drafted a text to my father maybe 10 different times. One draft said it plain. He had believed her in one night, and it had taken him 9 years to believe me. My thumb hovered over send until the screen dimmed. I deleted it. Not out of mercy, out of thrift. I had a bakery to open at 5 and no budget for a war. I used to think the truth was a door. Turns out, it is just a window. You can see in. Nobody has to open it. Noah found me at 2 in the morning wiping down counters that were already clean. He did not say anything smart or healing. He just took a rag. We wiped clean counters together in the dark. That is as close to a definition of marriage as I ever expect to get. Meanwhile, over in Millbrook, my month-old innocence was starting to leak past the walls of that house. And the family's response was not an apology. It was a campaign. You can always tell when a family system feels threatened because it stops arguing facts and starts distributing guilt. August was the campaign month. An aunt I had not heard from in 5 years texted family is family honey with a praying hands emoji, as if that sentence had ever paid one of my utility bills. Another wrote that a wedding is God giving everyone a chance to heal. A beautiful thought to have about somebody else's wedding. Word of the October date had gotten through. Small counties have excellent plumbing. Nobody asked to be invited exactly. They asked me to be bigger. Sharon sent an actual letter. Blue, stationery. Lovely penmanship. 3 paragraphs about Leah. Her remorse, her fragility, her progress, the delicacy of her recovery. For me, 1 line at the bottom, like a tip. We hope you can find grace in your heart. Grace in that grammar meant silence with a bow on it. My father sent nothing. But twice that month, Rosa clocked his pickup rolling slow past the bakery around closing. Once it paused across the street with the engine running long enough that she started for the door. Then it pulled away. He was 58 years old, 100 feet from his daughter. A windshield's worth of glass may as well have been a canyon. I have to protect this family, he told me once. He was still doing it. I just still was not in it. The first Tuesday of September, I boxed up lemon bars. The same recipe Rosa first tasted all those years ago. I carried them through the connecting door at 6 in the morning before either shop opened. Rosa was rolling silverware. She saw the box and the look on my face and said, "Uh-oh, sit." I sat where Nana Ruth used to sit. I had written a whole speech and it evaporated on contact. What came out was just the load-bearing part. You gave me a job when my own father would not give me a phone call. You rented me a room and never asked one question I could not afford. Will you walk me down the aisle? Rosa put down the silverware. She wiped her hands on her apron once, twice, a third time, though they were perfectly dry. She looked out the window at Main Street for a second. When she looked back, her eyes were shining and her chin was fighting for its life. "Mija," she said, "I've been practicing my walk for 9 years." Then we both went to pieces over the lemon bars. 2 grown businesswomen crying in a closed diner. She immediately began planning her outfit with the seriousness of a state dinner. That night I took the pencil and filled in the blank line on the butcher paper. Father of the bride. Rosa Delgado. I looked at it for a long time, understand what that pencil line was. It was not a placeholder. It was not a message to anyone in Millbrook. It was not revenge. It was an answer. And answers like that do not come with an undo. You cannot hand a woman that honor and then take it back, because a better late than never bid comes in. The chair was taken now. Whatever my father did next, he would be doing it to a door that had already closed. I should tell you what I decided not to do, because people always ask. Beth called in September, practically vibrating with justice. She wanted to tell everyone, the aunts, the cousins, the whole county plumbing system. She had dates and details. She had been in the room for the confession. Say the word, she said. And by Sunday, every person who ever sighed, you know exactly what Leah did. And I will not pretend the offer had no flavor. I had been the county's cautionary tale for 9 years. There is a version of me that wanted the recall notice published, wanted my old Sunday school teacher to choke on it. But I had watched that house my whole life, and I knew what a public exposure would buy. A fresh crisis starring Leah with Sharon directing and my father underwriting. Everyone's pity flowing to whoever broke loudest. I would spend my wedding season as a prosecutor, and that house would finally get me back. Not as a daughter. As a witness for the endless trial. No. The truth already did its job. I told Beth I am not hiring it to do mine. Its job was never the county anyway. Its job was that dining room table. And it had done that work in under an hour. What the people who heard it chose to do next. Silence. Letters about grace. Slow drive-bys. That was not the truth failing. That was them answering it. Beth grumbled but stood down. She is the good kind of soldier. I went back to buttercream trials and final fittings. And I would love to tell you I felt serene about all of it. Mostly I did. But there was one report from Beth that fall that I could not file anywhere. It kept me up the way the hoping used to. It was about my father. A parked truck. And a hat. Beth's mother lives around the corner from my bakery, 2 doors down from the hardware store. One Saturday night in early October, Beth was leaving her mom's around 9. She saw my father's pickup parked on the street. Engine off. Lights off. She almost knocked on the glass. Then she saw what he was doing and could not move. He was sitting in the cab with his hat off, holding it in both hands like church, and he was talking, alone, to the windshield, toward the lit sign of Second Rise, talking, stopping, shaking his head, starting over, rehearsing. Beth watched my father practice an apology to a pane of glass for 10 minutes. Then he put his hat back on and drove the 40 minutes home to Millbrook. I want to be careful here because this is the part of the story where I could lie to you in either direction. So here is the truest thing I can say about Mark Uli. He buried a wife young and it hollowed him out. Everything he has done since has been in service of never standing at a graveside like that again. Never losing a family twice. Sharon and Leah were his second chance. Leah's fragility was never an inconvenience to him. It was the very thing he organized his courage around. Protecting the breakable ones felt like fatherhood. It just required a daughter who could absorb the cost. And I was so sturdy. Do I understand him? I do. Understanding is a thing I can give him for free. It is not the same as a seat. When Beth told me about the hat, I cried for the length of one red light. Then I went inside and fed the sourdough starter. 10 days out from the wedding, the last shoe dropped. And it dropped exactly where I should have known it would. The Monday of week, Leah checked herself into the behavioral health unit at Millbrook General. I want to say this part straight without an eyebrow. It was real. Court dates. Debt. The family's sealed secret leaking anyway. The girl was drowning and she reached for an actual life raft instead of a manufactured one. Possibly for the first time in her life. I genuinely hope it was the beginning of everything for her, and both things are true. Her timing detonated in the middle of my week like it had been aimed. Because Tuesday morning my phone rang with a Millbrook number, and for the first time in 9 years, I heard Sharon's voice. No hello. No congratulations. She said Leah was in the hospital asking for family. She said stress had been piling on the girl from all directions. A phrase doing an astonishing amount of work. Then she laid down the sentence she had dialed 10 digits to deliver. If something happens to her while you are celebrating, that is on your conscience. There it was, the oldest tool in the drawer. The one that canceled a scholarship dinner 9 years before. Whoever is breaking loudest owns whoever is standing. I took the phone away from my ear and held it against my apron. I counted to 4. Slow, the way you count when the dough is not ready. And neither are you. Then I brought it back up and answered evenly. I hoped Leah got every bit of help she needed. Beth could pass along the ward's address for flowers. And I had a cake in the oven, which was true. It was my own wedding cake. Sharon was still talking when I said goodbye. I stood in my quiet kitchen and understood that the week was not going to get quieter. The night before the wedding, I baked. Tradition says the bride should not make her own cake. Tradition has never met my family or my cost margins. Besides, I was not going to let anyone else's hands do this. I took down Nana Ruth's recipe box and pulled the card I had chosen months before. Her hot milk cake. The one had my Sarah's name on it. Something think Bertachin Trayan, not mean thick gray. 3 tiers, vanilla bean, brown butter frosting. Her note was taped to the refrigerator where it has lived since the January of the funeral. While the layers baked, I read it again the way you touch a door frame on the way out. Truth does not need a crowd, it just needs time. The kitchen smelt like every good thing that ever happened to me. Noah came in at 10 from his last venue errand and stole frosting off a beater. He leaned against my counter watching me pipe the base border. Neither of us said much for a while. Sawdust and sugar have an understanding. Then he said whatever tomorrow brings we already won. Not a pep talk. An inventory. He carried the tears to the truck like they were sleeping children. We drove them to the venue cooler and came home. He was asleep in 4 minutes. The way men with clear consciences are. I lay there a while listening to the house tick. My dress hung on the closet door in its bag. My shoes stood by the wall. My phone sat on the charger on the nightstand, screen dark, perfectly innocent. I looked at it the way you look at an oven you are not sure you turned off. Tomorrow morning, while my hair was being pinned, it was going to make a sound. The morning was everything October promises on the postcards. Cold gold light. Maples going shameless. Beth's kids thundering up and down the venue farmhouse stairs in their socks. There is a getting ready room at the farm with a big mirror and bad coffee. By 8, it was all bobby pins and steamers, and somebody's playlist. Rosa arrived with her garment bag held high like a flag. My hair was half up. My mother's earrings were in. Somebody was hunting the second flower girl's shoe. Normal, holy chaos. I was in the middle of it, laughing at something, when the room's noise dipped for a second, the way rooms do. In that dip, my phone buzzed against the vanity table. Buzzed and kept buzzing. A call. I looked at the screen and the whole morning went quiet at the edges like snow starting. Dad, 9 years. And the caller ID still said Dad, because I had never changed it. If you want to know where hope hides in a person, there is your answer. It lives in the settings you never update. I let the call ring out on its own. The room had gone careful around me. Beth had one hand flat on her collarbone. Then the phone gave a single, softer buzz, not a voicemail. A message long enough that the preview ran out of room and ended in an ellipsis. It was 8:47. I picked the phone up. I sat down on the edge of the daybed, the dress hanging in the mirror behind me. There was about an hour on the clock before I was due at the top of an aisle. Beth said my name like a question. 1 minute, I said, and I opened my father's message. And I read it twice through. And the second time was worse. Here's what it said. Whole. Exactly as it lives in my phone to this day. Leah told us everything. I know I am 9 years too late. She is in the hospital and she is asking for you, Birdie. I am asking for me. Let me have the father-daughter dance. Give me the chance I did not give you. I read that message and 9 years came apart in my hands. Everything I had rationed since I was 22 was in it. Admission. The word everything, finally doing the work I had begged it to do. My name spelled out by his thumbs. An apology with no but in the middle of it, or close enough to fool a hungry heart. And underneath all of it, the exact shape of the fantasy I had run in the dark after Beth's June question. The gray suit, the front row, the handkerchief, arriving intact, real, offered an hour and change before the aisle. Offered an hour and change before the aisle. That is the cruelty of it. And I do not even think he designed it. He had simply found his courage at the last vending machine in the building. I stood up. Because sitting felt like agreeing to something. The woman in the mirror stood up with me. White dress, my mother's earrings, hands steady. I made myself look at her while the two futures ran. Future 1, I text him back. Come. He walks in weathered and sorry. 80 guests get a redemption story. The county cries. The dance happens. And every October after this one, my anniversary belongs partly to his timeline. His rescue. His 30 silent days. Cashed in at a discount at the exact hour I had no room to negotiate. Future 2. The message gets answered by the life I already built. Rose's arm. The pencil line on the butcher paper. The girl in the Corolla who promised herself no more houses she could be voted out of. My whole body wanted Future 1. And I need you to know that. Wanting your father is not a weakness you outgrow. It is a tide. And it was in the room with me. But wanting is not arithmetic. He believed her in one night. 9 years. Not one phone call. And now, 1 hour. 1 message. 1 dance. Requested like a change of address. Somewhere behind me, Beth quietly herded the kids out. I looked at the clock. And I knew what I did next. Took less time than a batch of biscuits. Fitting. Because that is about how long it took them to unmake my life 9 years ago. 3 things. In order. First I answered my father. I typed it standing up, thumb steady. No drafts this time. The sentence had been proofing since that midnight in July. And it came out fully risen. You believed her in one night. It took you 9 years to believe me. The dance is taken. I read it once and hit send and I felt the floor hold. Second. And no one saw me do this, and he never knew. I opened a message to a number I had kept for 9 years and never used. I wrote to my sister in her hospital bed. I hope you get well. Not for them, for you, because if that house taught me anything, it is how easily getting better becomes a performance for an audience. If one land from me could make getting well hers instead of theirs, it was worth the postage, whatever Leah broke. And she broke 9 years of my one life. She was also the first casualty of that house's economy. She had just been paid in a currency I was never offered. Send. Third, I powered the phone all the way off, that satisfying little shudder, and put it in Beth's hand. Until tomorrow, I said. And she nodded like a sergeant taking custody of something dangerous. And then there was nothing left to decide. That is when the cost presented its bill. All at once, standing in a farmhouse bedroom in a white dress. Because sending that text meant the man in the gray suit was never coming. Not late, not someday, not ever. I had spent 9 years angry at my actual father and quietly saving a seat for the imaginary one. That morning, I buried the imaginary one, without a service, in about a minute. Dry-eyed. On a deadline. Down the hall a fiddle was tuning and Rosa was calling my name, and it was time. And I want you to see what was waiting for me at the end of that aisle instead. The barn doors were shut and through them I could hear 80 chairs worth of rustle and one fiddle. Rosa stood beside me in navy blue. Gray hair swept up. More nervous than I was. She had written walking notes on her palm like a speech. She looked at me once, top to bottom, and said, "Your grandmother is insufferable right now, wherever she is." That sentence nearly ended my mascara before the doors even moved. Then, they moved. Here is what I had done weeks before with the 2 front row chairs on my side, the ones I had skipped like a sore tooth all spring. They were not empty, and they were not removed. On the first chair sat Nana Ruth in a silver frame, the photo from her 80th birthday, laughing with her whole head thrown back. On the second sat her recipe box, the gray inked hot milk card standing upright in front of it, the card that built the cake waiting in the cooler. The guests rose. And I want to tell you what I saw walking down that aisle on the arm of Rosa Delgado, because I was cataloging it on purpose. My kitchen crew in one row, crying into each other. The security guard from the grocery lot retired now in a tie. Diner regulars who had eaten my first burnt batches. Noah's grandmother, Beth, radiant, guarding her clutch with my whole old life switched off inside it. Noah, at the end of it all, wrecked in the best way. Every face in that barn belonged to someone who had shown up during the 9 years. Not before them, and not after the verdict. The entire congregation, of the meantime, on its feet. 9 years ago I was voted out of a family. That afternoon one voted me in. Unanimously. Standing. If there was a hole in the room where a gray suit should have been. I will be honest with you. I looked for it once. Front row. Second chair. Recipe box. The seat was not empty. It had not been empty for a long time. I just had not done the seating chart until now. Noah cried at his end of the aisle, which his brothers will be invoicing him for through the next decade. We were married at 10 in the morning. I remember almost none of the ceremony and all of his face. Then dinner. And dusk coming down early the way October does. String lights waking up along the rafters. And the first dances. Noah and I swayed to the song we had argued lovingly about for months. And then the DJ said the words we had rewritten on purpose. Not father-daughter. Just. The bride will now dance with the woman who gave her a shot. Rosa met me at the center of the floor. And 80 people stood up again. Somewhere in the middle of that song came the part I promised you at the beginning. Beth touched my shoulder as the dance was ending and tipped her head toward the barn's long window. Her face was a whole paragraph. Out past the reach of the string lights, in the gravel lot, sat my father's pickup. And beside it, my father, standing at the driver's door in his good jacket, hat in both hands, the windshield posture. The rehearsing posture. An hour out of the hospital he had spent his week at, and not one step toward the barn. Just watching the lit window, watching his daughter dance the dance he had asked for that morning. With the woman who had earned it. Over 9 years of first Tuesdays and dish shifts, the old me, the girl still auditioning, would have gone out to the gravel. I felt her start too. Then I stood still instead, in the middle of my own wedding, and through the glass I gave my father one small nod. He received it, and returned it. One nod. Hat back on. Into the truck. Taillights down the farm lane. That was the whole conversation, and it was the most honest one we had had in 9 years. He was still protecting his family. For once, standing behind that glass. So was I. I stopped auditioning that night. The role was never mine to win back. The rest of the night was just a wedding, which is to say, a miracle nobody writes headlines about. We cut Nana Ruth's hot milk cake with Noah's hand over mine. When the first guests tasted it, one of the diner regulars stood up and applauded the cake itself. That is the correct response to that recipe. Rosa gave the only toast. Brief, because she distrusts microphones. She raised her glass and said, "Family is whoever shows up early and stays late." Then she looked around the barn and added, "So apparently I have 80 children now." She sat down to the biggest laugh of the night. Bess danced with both of her kids at once. My kitchen crew commandeered the playlist around 10 and nobody stopped them. At some point, I stood at the edge of the floor with a plate of my own cake, watching all of it. The lights. The noise. The recipe box on its chair with a slice set in front of it like an offering. And I noticed that nobody was filming any of it. Not one raised phone. Everyone was too far inside the night to document it. Which is how you know a thing is real. My phone stayed dark in Beth's clutch until morning. Whatever the old world had sent it overnight could wait its turn, and when I finally did switch it back on, the mess had waited all right. But so had one small, unexpected door. 5 months later, on a cold March Saturday, I met my sister at a park in Harwick. Her request. Her drive. A letter that asked for 30 minutes and promised no ambush. I told Noah where I would be, and went alone. Leah looked different. Sober 4 months by then. Working at a nail place 2 towns from Millbrook. Living with a roommate. Doing the unglamorous outpatient work that does not make for good crying scenes. She brought me a coffee with my order written right on it, which meant she had asked Beth, which meant she had prepared. We sat on a bench by the drained fountain. She took out an actual folded page so she would not perform it, and she apologized the only way that counts. Itemized. The pill bottle by name. The afternoon she invented the story and what she had been afraid of. The envelope. The flip phone. The emergency room weekend that ended all questions. That one was real, she said, but I knew what it was buying, and I let it buy it. No excuses attached, and no request folded inside the apology. Which is how you spot the real ones. She did not ask to come to Thanksgiving. She asked for nothing at all. And then she said the smartest sentence anyone from that house ever said to me. "You do not owe me a relationship. I just did not want to be one more person who never said it to your face." I looked at my little sister, 25. Chapped hands. 4 months of real. And gave her the whole truth back. "I forgive you and we are not going back." Both of those are true. She nodded, like someone receiving exactly what she had budgeted for. We finished the coffees talking about nothing, her roommate's cat, my new apprentice. We hugged once quickly, and I watched her drive east. We trade birthday cards now. One a hay year, and that is the entire relationship, and it is entier. The old house goes on as the old house. Sharon's Christmas letter says everyone is doing wonderfully. My father's card came to the bakery's mailbox last month. My name in his handwriting. Something folded inside. It is in the drawer under the register. Unopened. Not thrown away. Some doors you do not walk through, and you do not nail shut either. You just live gladly on your side of them. And on Sunday mornings, Second Rise runs a free class now. The chalkboard says baking for anyone starting over. We fill every seat. Here is what 9 years taught me, and you can have it for free. An apology can close a wound and still not reopen a door, because forgiveness is something you give. But a seat at your table is something people earn. I want you to sit with that for a second. Because somewhere out there tonight there is a version of you standing in your own kitchen at midnight, wiping down a counter that is already clean, waiting for a phone to ring that never does, or worse, waiting to find out what you would say if it finally did. If that is you, listen closely. You are not bitter for choosing your peace. You are not cold for saving the seat for the ones who actually sat in it. You are not unforgiving because you refused to hand back the years they took. The people who showed up in the meantime are your family. The ones who arrived at the last minute with a receipt are guests. And guests do not get the front row. That is my story. One lie that cost 9 years, 2 chairs in the front row, and a dance that was already taken. If your family did not believe you, your truth does not need a crowd. It just needs time. And when the time finally comes, you get to decide what to do with it. Nobody else. If this story reached you tonight, if you felt any of it in your chest, do me one small favor. Hit the like button so somebody else who needs this hears it too. Drop a comment and tell me the truth. Was my father 1 hour and 9 years too late? Or did he do the only thing he was ever going to be brave enough to do? I read every single one. And if you have not already, tap that subscribe button and turn on the bell. Because the next story is about the phone call I got 6 months after the wedding, and the choice I had to make all over again. You are not going to want to miss it. Stay soft where it counts. Stay locked where it matters. And I will see you next time.